Boy, is my face red. I had announced several months ago that Buddha's birthday was in August, and I would take the opportunity then to talk about his life and what he's contributed to the world. But I went online to verify the exact date, if that was possible, and I came across several articles saying one can't be sure when he was born. It was a very long time ago, 540 years before the Common Era, give or take a decade. But the best guess is that it was probably in March or April. Whoops. But in my opinion, any time is a good time to talk about Buddha. In fact, there is so much to say. I've labeled today's service Part 1. A practicing Buddhist will spend a lifetime studying his teachings, meditating, looking for answers to his or her own questions about life. Surely we can spend 2 or 3 Sundays exploring what this fascinating ancient philosophy is all about. So welcome and namaste. This is Annie Foerster coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas in the sanctuary of First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church. Part of our covenant is to try to understand the diversity of faiths that support the people of the world in order to understand others and ourselves more completely. And I invite you to join us in this venture this morning. But let us start our music with a prelude. Thank you, Misha. That was Misha Bresnev, our pianist. Our call to worship is often an invitation to come in, but today's call to worship by Rick Hoyt invites us to go forth. Go forth, because we are always going forth from somewhere, going from our homes, going from our childhoods, going from our cities and countries, going from innocence to experience to enlightenment, going into mystery and questions, going into the desert, getting to the other side. So go forth. Leave behind the comfort and community of one place. Head into the anxiety and loneliness of another. Carry with you the love and laughter of this place and let it light your way. Carry with you the wisdom you learned and the good memories. May they give you strength for your journey. And when you've been away long enough, far enough, done what you'd set off to do, been there so long, that place too starts to feel like home. Come back. Come back to the one universal, everywhere and everywhen and everyone inclusive home. This beloved community of all creation that you can never really leave. We light our chalice this morning for our many homes. For the houses or apartments in which we live, for the community of neighbors and communities and of families and friends, for the work homes and the play homes we choose, for the home of our living bodies and the home of our fertile minds. May we go forth to do the work we are called to do, and may we always feel at home. Please join us for our opening hymn this morning. It's in the gray hymnal, number 82, This Land of Bursting Sunrise. Our lead singer this morning is Daniel Levine.
There This land of bursting sunrise, all lavender and blue, its cloud-strewn light-swept day skies flow, and every day renew. To east the glow of dawning, to west the blaze of night, round all the long horizon's rim, the everlasting light. This land of open vistas, life rooted deep and free, thy canyon plains, thy mountains vast, plumb earth's immensity. Here in life's fragile balance, the sun and stars above find hand in hand and heart to heart the everlasting love.
Thank you, Daniel and Misha. That's a song I haven't sung before. Perhaps we can learn it when the congregation comes back. Please join me now in repeating our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Well, my questions this morning is a big one. Why is there suffering in the world? This is the question that Siddhartha Gautama had when he saw that everyone didn't have the same riches, support, and love that he had. He had no idea that he might be able to answer the question, but when he thought, he found a solution. He shared it with the world. The title Buddha means the awakened one. His claim was that each of us might one day become a Buddha too. So then let's start this morning with the question, what did Buddha discover? And I'll tell you a little bit about him with the story for all ages. And it goes like this. A very long time ago in ancient India, a baby boy was born in the home of a local prince. His parents named him Siddhartha Gautama. His parents loved him very much, but his mother died shortly after he was born, and to save him from further suffering, his father kept the boy close to him, He gave him excellent food to eat. He gave him fine clothes to wear and good servants to wait on him. But he kept him within the walls of the palace so that he need not know that all people were not as lucky. And when Siddhartha became a man, his father found him a bride, and soon they had a son of their own. All this time, he had never been outside the palace fence. And one day he was riding with a friend, and he said, I've never been outside these walls. What does the rest of the world look like? And the friend said, well, let us see for ourselves. And out they went. And the first thing he saw was an old man who walked painfully with a cane and looked as if he didn't really have enough to eat. And the next thing he saw was a man who was clearly unwell, sick with fever, wandering down the street looking for water to cool his brow. And finally he saw a dog lying in the middle of the road, run over by a careless cart driver. All around him, the prince could see suffering. Well, he had never suffered like that in his life, and it bothered him greatly. The pain and old age, sickness and death were all part of other people's lives, but not his. He became very unhappy. Why? He kept asking himself. And then one day Siddhartha met a monk. The monk had little to call his own, but he was happy because he believed that what he did might change the world and make it a better place. He could not believe the monk could find happiness in a world that held so much misery. He finally made a startling decision. He decided to leave his father, leave his wife, and leave his newborn son and become a monk himself until he found out the answer to why there is so much suffering in the world. Well, Siddhartha traveled across ancient India in search of peace and calm in the face of suffering and sadness. He traveled for 6 years as a monk, but he wasn't finding any answers to his question. He was beginning to despair. Perhaps there was no answer. Perhaps all of his life he would be unhappy. Oh, he was miserable. He thought, I must figure this out for myself. He vowed he would go nowhere until he had an answer. And so he sat down beneath a large tree that would give him shelter and shade. He accepted the food given to him by kind people who passed him, thinking he was still a monk. He simply sat and thought. And then one day the answer occurred to him. The suffering was caused by the people themselves who didn't know how to take care of themselves, who didn't know how to treat other people, who didn't know how to be happy with what they had. And he developed a way that people could be happy with what they had, with loving one another, and with spreading the good news around to other people. Wake up, people, he said. And the people that heard his message called him Buddha, which means the wakened one. This is what he taught the people who wanted to know why he was happy. These are the 8 basic laws that all people should follow if they wish to end suffering. 1, to know the truth. 2, to intend to resist evil, to say nothing to hurt others, to respect life and property, to work at a job that does not injure others, to try to free one's mind from evil thoughts, to be in control of one's feelings, to practice appropriate forms of concentration. Well, the Buddha realized that people could not follow rules if the rules were too strict or too difficult. And that's why he called it the Eightfold Path, and it's also called the middle way. Now, the rules suggest a certain behavior, but it is behavior that costs nothing except effort and care. There's no punishment if you don't try or you don't succeed. Buddha continued to travel around India, telling everyone he met about the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Many people listened. They too had trouble finding happiness in a world full of suffering. And some who listened became monks and helped to spread the word. But the rules of the Eightfold Path are simple to list, but are sometimes difficult for people to follow. And to help people better understand and remember the rules, Buddha's teachings were written down as proverbs more than 2,000 years ago. Here is one of those proverbs. Hatreds never cease by hatred in this world. By love alone they cease. You see, the goal of Buddhism is for everyone to become the greatest person in the world. Oh, we aren't there yet, but there are more than 500 million Buddhists in the world who value goodness, self-control, wisdom, calm, and love. And some of these Buddhists are Unitarian Universalists as well. Well, like all religious leaders, Siddhartha Gautama had amazing stories told about his life. And some of them are possibly true, but many of them are exaggerated. It was the way of the ancient world to make its religious leaders appear so astounding that people couldn't help but follow what they had to say. They are not like us, these stories seem to say. Their very births are miracles, and they live their lives creating miracles. You can believe that or not as you will, or you can look further and be astounded, not by these made-up stories of their lives, but by the very thoughts they had and the rules they lived by. Buddha had been a monk, and Buddha did sit and think about these questions. Like all religious leaders, Buddha had followers that disagreed with one another, so that there became 2 different ways of practicing what Buddha taught. One way looks at him as if he were a god, kind of the way that the early Catholic Church made Jesus into the Son of a God. And the other way is to see him as an awakened philosopher who was willing to teach the rest of the world what he had learned after much arduous exploration. I find the miracle stories themselves fascinating, a kind of appetizer to the main course, always tasty, but not quite as satisfying as the dinner itself. Still, I wouldn't pass up a good brie on a cracker just because we were going to have coq au vin as the main course. So let me tell you a little bit more about the stories. If you look at the many varieties of statues of Buddha, I've got 2 of them here in the sanctuary with me, you might not recognize them as the same person. You know the familiar laughing Buddha, the one with his arms up like this, doesn't show any of the search and suffering of his life as he sought the answer to his question. But this statue represents the awakened one he became and reminds us to greet each day with joy. The Serene Buddha is also one of the later images, reminding us to meditate. Meditation is a way of quieting the mind, Buddha taught, allowing it to take in more of the truth. It is also a path to becoming the greatest person you can possibly be, a Buddha yourself. Well, this teaching is often misunderstood. It does not mean that you are better than everyone else. It means that you are the best person you can be. The famous example that Buddhists use is the story of the ant. When an ant puts his best effort into carrying a grain of rice, the ant is no longer just an ant. He's the best ant he can be, and thus the greatest ant in the world. But when a horse carries a grain of rice, it is not much of an achievement. I was surprised myself when I first came upon a statue purporting to be the Buddha that was neither happy nor serene. It was of a creature who was gaunt and starving. Well, this was an early Buddha, the one who had vowed to follow the monks of his day in their search for nirvana, an afterlife that would be better than this world of sorrow. The monks were not allowed to own anything, and even their food and water came from the generosity of others. But if they failed to find generous people, they simply starved until they did. And they were often beaten and run out of town. Buddha eventually left the monks, deciding his health was important to his own search. The monks scorned him and mocked him for giving up. Yet it was 5 of these same monks who later became his first disciples. I've told you before about the 4 pillars of Buddha's discovery, beginning with all life is dukkha, which is usually translated as suffering. But that's often too dramatic for most people. I found another way of saying it online this week, and this might be easier for you to understand in today's world. We are living in an ongoing state of dissatisfaction. I think of a phrase I often use, it's always something. The rain has stopped and the sun is shining, but now it's too hot. I had the living room painted, but now my furniture looks shabby. I have a wonderful new job that I love, but the company is stingy and doesn't pay me enough for the work they expect me to do. It's always something. See, it's not suffering exactly, but dissatisfaction with life the way it is. But then comes the second pillar. Suffering or dissatisfaction arises from causes and conditions. We didn't make the world. We don't control how it works. Can I help it if the world isn't perfect? I mean, I've learned that wisdom comes with age, but so do aching joints. I bought a new car 2 years ago that gave me 56 miles per gallon, but I just learned they have a new model with more improvements and more space in the rear for hauling things. Could I justify making a trade? Oh, why do things have to be so difficult? Are you feeling this? The causes and conditions seem to come from within myself. And if you agree with that, you might want to listen to Pillar 3. There is a possibility of reaching a state where that dissatisfaction and suffering have ceased. A possibility. What does that mean, reaching a state? Well, please don't tell me I have to wait until I die and go to heaven. But I'm listening. Can I get a new car and still be the best person I can be? Let's ask the 4th pillar. There's a path for us to follow that will bring us to such a state. So according to Buddha, the answer is yes. You don't have to wait until you die, and there is a plan It's called the Eightfold Path, 8 Easy Steps to Nirvana, Awakening Heaven on Earth. Let's begin there when I come back. But for now, my generosity report. I have a surprise for you today. I have some guests in the sanctuary that are going to join me up here, and I want to introduce them to you. The first one is Daniel Polk. He is the Executive Director of the North Texas Unitarian Universalist congregations, and with him is Carol Kappa, who's a member of Westside Unitarian Universalist Church in Fort Worth, and on the board of NTUC. And so, Daniel, why are you here?
Well, I'm here from NTUC, the U congregations of North Texas. We want to help grow First Jefferson, and as so, I have a check here to help expand the RE program, taking the director position to half-time. $15,000. Spend it well.
Thank you. Thank you. We have added some time to our Director of Religious Education, and we are going to improve the program greatly with your help. Thank you so much for coming. Whew. That's exciting, isn't it? And part of that is your generosity for believing that we could do this, and when we hired Thomas Earthman to take this half-time position this spring. But here's some more good news. We are planning to have a live auction this year, not the one online like we did last year. Yay! It will be sometime in early November. We are gathering a committee of people who have been involved with auction planning before and have held leadership roles in the past. The Board of Trustees has agreed to be a part of the workforce of the auction. So many jobs to do, and I have agreed to join them and take one of those jobs. I think it could be fun. Hint, hint, there's room for you. And Dan Sexton has agreed to chair this committee. I Googled sainthood for him, but the process is too slow. So I'm thinking if you start looking at what you want to donate to the auction, how you want to help, that might be just as good as offering sainthood to Dan. An in-person auction, dinner, the silent auction, walking around trying to protect your bid before it closes, the loud auction, it's called the live auction, the David Bindi handling the bidding for services and dinners and events you'll want to bid on. Oh, I am so ready for this. How about you? I have a reading this morning. It's from an Introduction to Buddhism by Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, who explains, in general, Buddha means the awakened one, someone who is awakened from the sleep of ignorance and sees things as they really are. A Buddha is a person who is completely free from the faults and mental obstructions of most of us. There are many people who have become Buddhas in the past, and many people will become Buddhas in the future. Buddha has awakened from the sleep of ignorance and has removed all obstructions from his mind. Moreover, a Buddha has great compassion, which is completely impartial, embracing all living beings without discrimination. Eventually, through meeting an emanation of Buddha in the form of a spiritual guide, everyone will have the opportunity to enter the path to liberation and enlightenment. As the great Indian Buddhist scholar Nagarjuna claimed, there is no one who has not received help from Buddha. Through the force of his or her compassion, a Buddha spontaneously does whatever is appropriate to benefit others. He has no need to think about what is the best way to help living beings, and she naturally and effortlessly acts in the most beneficial way. Of all the ways in which a Buddha helps living beings, the supreme way is by emanation as a spiritual guide. Through his or her teachings and examples, an authentic spiritual guide leads his or her disciples along the spiritual path to liberation and enlightenment. While you think about that, let's hear another song and sing along with Dan. Be ye lamps unto yourselves, number 184 in the hymn book, and the words will be on the screen.
Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be your own kind. confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as to the only Lamb. Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as to the only Lamb.
Well, here's the good news. You don't have to wait until you find a qualified spiritual guide. I am certainly not claiming to be one, so if that's what you were hoping, you're out of luck. But there are many books, many ways of studying Buddhism, classes in meditation to start you out. Simply learning about the Eightfold Path is a way to begin to understand the theology and the philosophy of Buddhism. The paths consist of naming 8 ways of looking at how you view the world and responding to it. As a Buddhist nun once said, if you like lists, then Buddhism is the religion for you. A simplified version found on the website learnreligions.com said the Eightfold Path is composed of 8 primary teachings that Buddhists follow and use in their everyday lives. Right view and right understanding, which is insight into the true nature of reality. Right intention, the unselfish desire to realize enlightenment. Right speech, using speech compassionately, being careful of what you say. Right action, using ethical conduct to manifest compassion. Right livelihood, making a living through ethical and non-harmful means. Right effort, which means cultivating wholesome qualities in yourself. Right mindfulness, whole body and mind awareness, and right concentration, meditation, or some other dedicated, concentrated practice. And the word translated as right is samyak in Sanskrit, or sama in Pali, which was Buddha's native language, and it means wise or wholesome, skillful, or ideal. It also describes something that is complete and coherent. The word right should not be taken as a commandment, as in, do this or you are wrong. But another way to think of right in this case is the sense of equilibrium, like a boat riding the waves, but remaining right. Now, if you're like me, 8 is too many to absorb in one sitting. Can you remember even one of the list I just read to you? I can't. Many people spend a lifetime practicing Buddhism. I don't want you to give up just because the list is too long. I mean, I'm not sure I could name all 7 of our principles if you asked me to recite them on the spot. And consider the 10 commandments. 10! And commandments. So let's just choose 2 from the list to start with. If you were here, I'd ask you which 2 intrigue you the most, but you're not, and I had to choose. I selected right intention, the unselfish desire to realize enlightenment, the truth, because who doesn't want to be a better person? And then I chose right action, using ethical conduct to manifest compassion, because it felt very Unitarian Universalist already. Right intention is sometimes called right thinking. Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist monk and author of the book The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, says, thinking is the speech of our mind. Right thinking makes our speech clear and beneficial. Because thinking often leads to action, right thinking is needed to take us down the path of right action. This reminds me of the early Unitarians who said, if we can teach people to understand their own minds and what led them to think the way they do, this will be a better world for all of us. We tend to think that thoughts don't count. It says at learnreligion.com, that only what we do matters. But it turns out that our thoughts lead the way to our actions. You know, I remember a discussion I had once with a collegial support group in which we came to the conclusion that perhaps we should pay more attention to the fact that we are called human beings because we act as if our name is human doings. Simply being starts with our thoughts. Our thoughts are important. They come out of our world views, the way we were taught to see the world in which we live. And if we don't understand how our views differ, we can never understand what our supporters or our detractors are saying and thinking. Unfortunately, when we are born, we come with no instructions. What we are given as children is the only world we know until we open ourselves to other points of view, to other possible ways of thinking about things. We already know that isn't the easiest thing to do, but we know it is possible. Buddha himself is said to have taught all that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness will follow him, like a shadow that never leaves him. The Buddha also taught there are 3 ways to have good intentions. First, you have to recognize and renounce the bad intentions you might have held in the past. It's the common practice of changing bad habits into good habits, isn't it? Then you will have to proceed with goodwill, thinking the best of what is to come. And finally, you have to intend to harm no one. That's kind of the major goal, as well as a measurement of our progress. If our actions cause harm to any person or creature, it's an indication that we haven't really achieved right thinking. And according to Buddha, we don't give up at that point. One of the greatest processes of learning Buddhism is the built-in natural self-forgiveness. You make a mistake, but instead of beating yourself up about it, you simply say, "Oops, I'm not there yet. I forgive myself, and I begin again in love," as our own Unitarian teachings instruct us. Be ye lamps unto yourself, Buddha reminds us. Thich Nhat Hanh suggests 4 things that might help you achieve right intentions. Before you do something, ask yourself, are you sure? And whenever you start on a new path, ask yourself, what am I doing? Recognize your habit energy and be aware of its power. And cultivate compassion. Are you exhausted? Still want to be a better person? Let's take a break and think about the people we know who love us the way we are and who provide the role models of who we might become. Let us look at our communion of names and the milestones. Well, this coming Wednesday, August 4th, begins the first choir rehearsal with our new choir director, Michael Newen. It is a great time to join the choir if you've been thinking about it. We're all going to feel new at this as we experience new ways of rehearsing, breathing, singing. So be here in the sanctuary at 7 o'clock Wednesday evening, August 4th. I'll be here. We often meditate on the stories that we hear at this time in the service. Meditation is a big part of the Buddhist practice. So I'd like to take a moment this morning to recall the loving kindness meditation. If you want, just sit back in your chair and close your eyes, relax your mind, and I will say the words of the meditation, and you simply say them to yourself, quietly aloud or silently in your mind. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I have peace and joy. May I know love. You take the time to say that as many times as you need to heal yourself. And then you think of family and friends you wish to bless, and you say, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you have peace and joy. May you know love. And now, finally, think of those who block your way, who stand against you, to whom you have offered animosity in the past, and find the strength to bless them, saying these words. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you have peace and joy. May you know love. Misha, let us have a musical interlude. A little meditation, a little beautiful music helps to clear the mind, doesn't it? So are you ready to look at another of the Eightfold Paths? Well, if you're still with us, I'm assuming you're ready. If what we think is what we are, it certainly leads right into talking about right action. Thich Nhat Hanh calls it the practice of touching love and preventing harm, the practice of nonviolence toward ourselves and others. Toward ourselves and others. I think this is what I like best about Buddhism. It doesn't encourage you to beat yourself up, to hold on to guilt. People are fond of asking older persons if they have any regrets. Well, I know some people collect regrets, and others disregard them, saying, oh, I can't do anything about them now. But I think the better answer might be, well, I did have regrets, but I forgave myself, and I collected my best actions instead to remind me to keep on the path. Remember what the Buddhist nun said about loving lists? Well, Buddhism comes with a list of precepts, things not to do. And they include not killing, not stealing, not misusing sex, not lying, and not abusing intoxicants. Just 5. It seems that throughout the ages, people have misbehaved badly in much the same ways. Precepts are not commandments. They are simply reminders, like roadside signs. Go slow around the curve, yield to incoming traffic, mind the speed limit. And like learning to drive a car and pay attention to the signs, there are training lessons in Buddhism. To counteract the precepts, the training for right actions includes how to be mindful of the better way. And the first thing they teach you is how to respect life, protect life, and work for a planet that sustains life. Sounds like things that are in the news currently. And then next, you're taught to be generous. Give freely of your time and resources where they're needed. Third, practice your sexuality with compassion. Do not give pain. And to avoid the precept of lying, practice deep listening and loving speech. And finally, let what you consume nourish you. This goes for food, intoxicants, books, television, and entertainments, because too much of any of them can cause agitation. Full disclosure at this point, I am a reader of Buddhism more than a practitioner. I think it is probably the most logical of the world religions, but I have to admit that followers have created some unbelievable stories, some rules that feel like commandments. But for the most part, I find the practitioners kind and loving. And I find their stories and their instructions to be told with compassion. Much of it feels familiar with our own faith traditions, our stories, our principles and teachings. In the past dozen years or so, my own spiritual discipline has included striving for compassion, trying to understand what causes other people's actions before I condemn them for it. And my second one is letting go, ridding myself of the beliefs and injustices of collected grievances that hurt me more than help me. I do meditate. I do write in a journal every day. I try to understand myself. It's not easy being human. One of my shortcuts when I get stuck is just to say to myself, think like the Buddha. That's how I get out of problems that just go around in my mind and never stop. Think like the Buddha. This often means just let it go. It's not worth it. This often means consider what it would look like if I looked at it with love. And what often happens eventually is this. I forgive myself and others. I begin again in love. Oh, I feel a hymn coming on. This is one of my favorites, number 1037 in the green hymnal. And Dan and I are going to say it together as soon as I find my place. He's going to sing it and I'm going to say it. You want to start us off, Misha? For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again
for falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
And those words were not written by Buddha. They were written by Robert Eller Isaacs, a Unitarian Universalist minister, and the music is by Les Clean. I like that song. Well, we lit our chalice this morning for home, for the places we feel at home, including our own minds and our own bodies. May we take the light of this chalice into our own hearts and minds, so that home is a place where we want to be and are. Buddha said it, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So it is in our lives. So may we think well in all our lives.